So the reason we are here today is to talk about the movie you've chosen, which is 1978's Superman the movie. So just to kind of start off, I was wondering if you could tell me kind of how you first experienced that film and why it was the one you decided to choose to talk about.
Well, I experienced Superman the movie when I was a kid. It must have been on the BBC, and I've argued with my mum before because I always thought the first Superman film I saw was Superman 3, because I just remember being terrified of the robot lady that appears at the end and just seeing Superman turn evil and stuff. So, but she was very adamant that I saw Superman the movie and was just so kind of enamored and blown away when I saw Christopher Reeve flying and catching Lois Lane and the helicopter, which is a scene which still hasn't been topped, I don't think, with a superhero's introduction. And yeah, it kind of just stuck with me. It was just something that's so kind of special to me. And also it's a film that was made in the UK, by British talents with the technicians and special effects, and also directed by Richard Donner, who's an American, and probably funded by many Europeans and Warner Brothers themselves. But it was just as I got older, it was just seeing this movie that was kind of very much part of British kind of industry, how it was made at Pinewood Studios. It felt kind of like it's very special. But it was just seeing Christopher Reeve as Superman was just like, it was like seeing this person to step off the comic book onto the big screen. And I often flip-flop on my favourite movies. Sometimes I say Ghostbusters, but I think Superman was always the one that's always come back. And, it's aged pretty well. I mean, visual effects, obviously, you can kind of giggle a little bit about some of the ropey miniatures near the end. But I think with how it's executed and how serious they take the character, you kind of push aside any sort of quirks about its visual effects. But it's just, and this year it's 40 years old, and Warner Brothers are going to be pushing forward with a 40th anniversary, which is really good, and remastering it in 4K. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that should be great. Like, I already think it still looks great. So I watched it last week for the first time in probably about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was still really taken away by it. I thought it was a really good film. I think it's interesting, the point you kind of alluded to there about how seriously it takes itself. Like, it almost feels like an early Bond film by the end, more than it does the superhero movies of today.
Yes, it's kind of got these kind of different kind of styles to it. Well, Superman the movie is kind of, you can see how it's like broken up into kind of three different structures where it takes itself really seriously with the sort of opening act, and then you've got this, once it goes to Metropolis, it becomes this kind of a bit of a comedy, a kind of slight rom-com with the Lois and Clark, obviously with Superman, and then once the nuclear bomb goes off, the rockets thrown into the San Andreas fault, it becomes this kind of, I suppose a kind of Bond-esque, but also this kind of just this disaster movie, a little bit like Earthquake or something like that from the 70s, where you had things like Towering Inferno and things like that. So yeah, it does take itself seriously, but it's also, there is comedy to it, which some people kind of snigger about, but I think the comedy doesn't go too far. If you ever watch the TV cut of Superman the movie, which came out earlier this year, it was broadcast on TV in the early 80s when they premiered it on the ABC channel in America, and it kind of got repeated in other countries such as Australia and Ireland, but it was over 3 hours long, this cut, and there's a lot more comedy in that, which kind of doesn't work. So you can get that on Blu-ray now, but that is it's an interesting insight into seeing an extended movie, because I don't really extend movies for TV anymore. This is something during the 80s to get the people to tune in, but there's about 40 minutes more footage in that film. Some of it did turn up in the director's cut of Superman that was released in 2001, I think. So the common title you can get on Blu-ray is either the special edition of Superman the movie or the theatrical cut. I think the box sets have different options. I'm not sure which one you watched recently. Was it the extended cut or the theatrical cut?
I believe it was the theatrical cut.
Did it have the, oh god, after Superman's first appearance, he talks to his father in the Fortress of Solitude as Superman? Was that in it? Do you recall?
I don't believe it was.
Okay, good. Like it's a theatrical cut. The theatrical cut is my favourite, so it's best for pacing, I think.
Yes, I think so. It felt very well paced. I mean, you sort of nodded to the comedy there. My favourite scene in the whole movie is the date night / interview between Clark and Lois.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? Where it's this, because she's so, when she's around Clark, she's like super confident, but when she's with Superman, she's just all giddy, and she asks him how big he is. And she goes, "Oh, how tall are you?" You know what I mean? And like, "What underwear am I wearing?" And he goes, "Pink." And so it's this wonderful kind of flirting between them, which is kind of done, kind of like I suppose like a couple of teenagers, I suppose, but it's done in a very classical way. It's not done. It's over the top. It felt like in the 70s. It felt like a kind of a throwback to the sort of romantic comedies of like the 30s and 40s maybe, or the 50s. But it seems when you see Clark Kent, he's very much, Christopher Reeve's interpretation is very much like Cary Grant with his performance. And that after that date where they fly around together, when Lois says goodbye to Superman, that amazing tracking shot as you see Chris come in through the other door as Clark Kent. And you see this amazing transformation of him. You know, he takes his glasses off and his shoulders stretch out and he stands up taller and he changes his voice. It just shows you how good Christopher Reeve was as an actor, and very underrated because everyone just thinks of him as Superman, but they often think playing a superhero is relatively easy. Just put on the suit and let everything take over. But this shows you he tried to create a difference between Clark Kent and Superman.
Well, I mean, that stuff really comes through when you watch the modern Superman films, when you look at Henry Cavill in the role. I think Henry Cavill is arguably a technically better actor than Christopher Reeve. But there's something that doesn't quite fit when he plays Superman. Whereas Christopher Reeve, you absolutely believe it. And I think with Henry Cavill, it's almost that he has this thing about him. So you look at the kind of best things he's been in film. You look at, I think he was really fun in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I saw Mission Impossible Fallout last week.
Oh, did you?
Yes, it's fantastic. It's amazing.
I had heard very good things.
And he is brilliant in it. But there's something about him where he almost has to have a level of arrogance to him. And that doesn't fit Superman at all, because Superman is so pure and so innocent.
Well, I think that was the problem. I think with many fans of Superman, when they watched Man of Steel and the sequel and Justice League, was that his interpretation wasn't the classic Superman. When you see, in Superman the movie, when he saves Lois, she goes, "Who are you?" He goes, "I'm a friend," and flies off. That is the essence of what Superman is. He's a friend. He's there to help you. Where Man of Steel, he kind of didn't really seem like a friend. He was just there to protect Lois because he fancied her, So, and it's also kind of this kind of meat-headed attitude. I think it was, Man of Steel was kind of seemed to be aimed at appeasing people that weren't fans of Superman. But there's some great stuff in Man of Steel. I mean, I was just reading John Byrne's Man of Steel comic strip from 1986, which they kind of took on a lot. I think Lois and Clark TV show kind of borrowed a lot from that, but there's also elements of that in Man of Steel. But I wouldn't say Henry's a better actor than Chris. I think if you just look at Chris's other work, things like The Remains of the Day or Summer in Time, you can see Chris, to be honest, didn't want to be an action star. He didn't want to do all those things. He liked theatre, and so if you see the smaller independent films he did, what period dramas, he excels in them, but unfortunately they didn't do as well as, say, Superman. Chris had many opportunities to be an action star. He got offered so many roles, but he turned them down. So I suppose I think the thing for me, if I was in his shoes, just do a Superman film every couple of years to get the big paycheck, and then do other films that you want to do. I think that's probably the best outlook I would do with that business. But Cavill's performance, and as you say, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that was the best one I saw him in, because he, so far with his Superman, he didn't create a difference between Clark Kent and Superman. I mean, Clark Kent doesn't have to be bumbling, but I think there should be a difference. I think even just changing his hair, which he didn't do, I don't think. Maybe he kind of slicked it back when he was Superman, but there wasn't much of a change of his persona.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned kind of the financial side of things for Chris and for the film. So at the point this was made, it was the most expensive movie that had been produced up to that stage. And do you think perhaps that Superman is kind of neglected in the sort of early days of the blockbuster narrative? Because people talk about Jaws in 75 and then Star Wars in 77, but Superman is often not a part of that narrative.
Yes, that's a very good point, Tom. Yeah, I get frustrated when I see articles. I just mentioned Star Wars, Jaws, and E.T. and other movies of that like, but Superman often gets forgotten about, and its achievements and how much it made. You know, it was a massive movie, it's odd. I think in more recent years it's started to gain the respect it deserved. I think once it came out on DVD in early 2000, people start to realise, wow, this is a really good movie, and they've completely forgot about it. And now with every new superhero movie that comes out, there's often comparisons made to Superman, and with, I think it was like last year, maybe, I think Jeff Johns and Kevin Feige, who were kind of at this dinner to celebrate Richard Donner's career, they said at Marvel they watch Superman the movie every time they go into a new production of a new Marvel film. I'm not sure if it's entirely true, but I mean, I think it's a wonderful kind of sort of respect to that movie. And Christopher Nolan, you know, took inspiration from Superman the movie for Batman Begins, and it's how it's structured and stuff, and how seriously took it, and having these kind of big names be involved like Superman. We've got Terrence Stamp, Marlon Brando, and also Sam Raimi's Spider-Man takes many elements from Superman, even Superman 2 and 3. You know, if you look at Spider-Man 3, he turns evil, and in Superman 3, he turns evil. So
I try not to think of Spider-Man 3 whenever I
can. Yeah.
It's like it's strange that it has such a bizarre position within the superhero movie canon, this film, because it came about so far before these other superhero movies. Like, big superhero movies didn't start being enormous after this until, like, you know, the X-Men films and the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans. And
well, it was Batman.
It's like a 2-decade gap.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, if you go back to 1989 with the release of Batman, that was really the catalyst that started the big, because Batman did make more money than Superman when it came out, but that had one of the most impressive marketing strategies, and that's what many studios tried to copy throughout the 90s, because it had all the merchandise and stuff, and had obviously the big names, and Jack Nicholson made a huge killing because he took a percentage of the profits. So there was it was really Superman the movie, and you had obviously the 3 sequels, and then Superman 4 kind of, you know, it kind of destroyed the franchise due to Canon Films meddling and their spending. So then you had Marvel were nowhere at this point. They'd licensed out Spider-Man to Canon, which never took off, was never made. And then they had the Punisher, and then you had Batman. And then I think Warner Brothers kind of dominated for a long time, and Warner Brothers kind of sat on these licenses during the whole time when Marvel were, you know, taking over come the early 2000s. So even Warner Brothers had the opportunity to make Superman in the 70s, and because they never attempted to. So it was the Solkinds who kind of got the license to do Superman after they made the Three Musketeers with Richard Lester, who went on to direct Superman, the rest of Superman 2 and Superman 3. So it was really them who spearheaded the idea of the Solkinds were to introduce a blockbuster superhero movie done on an epic scale. And if you think back, though, Star Wars really kind of kick-started this kind of mentality to sort of do these big blockbusters again, because films weren't that big for a long time, because the 70s was just a different output of science fiction. It was very much like Planet of the Apes or movies that weren't huge blockbusters. They made good profit, but they weren't monster movies that would eventually become a Star Wars and Superman, and you could say Alien as well. Alien's another movie that often, if you go back to the discussion of blockbusters, Alien often is often forgotten about in that kind of collective during that time.
I think maybe in that case it's because Alien is a horror movie, and that creates a certain level of being maligned that you don't necessarily get in other genres. And the superhero movie is kind of the same.
Yes, that is true. And it's nice now knowing that, you know, when the latest Marvel movie comes out, or DC one, there is this kind of slight comparison to Superman the movie and why it worked. But there's elements in Superman the movie that they don't try and follow, like having a very memorable theme tune. There isn't, you don't have this wonderful opening sequences anymore. I think down to sort of the impatient attitude of the audience nowadays. I just want the film to start. I don't want this intro. And all the money's spent on the end titles now. And in some cases they don't. I mean, I don't think Infinity War didn't have any money spent on the end credits. It was just black and white titles, But there's elements where, Superman the movie, where you have this amazing introduction to the character, and a lot of superhero films don't seem to capture that quite well. I mean, Spider-Man with Sam Raimi had this kind of quite a nice sequence where he saves Mary Jane when the Green Goblin attacks, and Batman Begins. You have it's more of a low-key introduction where he beats up the guys on the pier, and it's all done, like really quick, so you don't see what he's doing, and. But even with that, the X-Men movies, they didn't have this kind of really impressive introduction. So that's one of the things to show this character coming to life, is to have them appear in a really big way. And seeing that sequence now today when he saves Lois and the helicopter and catches it with the other hand, is one of the most amazing sequences, and it doesn't at all dated, because it's just so cleverly orchestrated in its execution with front projection, miniatures, and live action stuff. There isn't any kind of optically kind of dodgy blue screen where you're seeing this kind of like black outline around the character like you see in Superman 4. But it's a film that even after 40 years, it still holds up well, and I think I just don't think Warner Brothers have huge amounts of faith in it at the moment. I think every time there's a new superhero, obviously there's a new Superman now with Henry Cavill, so they don't try, and the marketing strategy is not trying to focus on the old but focus on the new. But most of the time, most people like to go back to the old stuff, and because as with the focus on my documentary, people still love 80s action movies and would rather watch the old Predator film than say watch some of the new ones. But yeah, maybe it's just everyone's obsessed with nostalgia nowadays.
Well, it's strange because at the moment there's a lot of kind of think pieces around online because it's the 10-year anniversary of The Dark Knight.
Yes, that's right.
And so there are lots of pieces around at the moment about what Dark Knight did to kind of create the modern superhero boom and how it affected, along with Iron Man, how it helped to popularise superheroes. But you look at the superhero movies of today, and they don't really feel like they were influenced by The Dark Knight. Most of them feel like they still hark back to Superman the movie. So you mentioned how the Marvel guys watch it before the new films. And then you look at, even over in DC, you look at something like Wonder Woman, which owes far more of a debt to Superman the movie than it does to The Dark Knight.
Yeah, that's true.
In the thing that made Wonder Woman so lovely is that it's not self-consciously dark and moody. It's serious and earnest, but in that really innocent way that Superman the movie was.
Well, yeah, it was Patty Jenkins, wasn't it, who directed Wonder Woman? She's obsessed with Superman the movie. There's a great article online where she just does goes through the entire film talking about what she loves about it, and she's a big fan of Richard Donner. So yeah, Wonder Woman the movie was very much just keeping in key in tone to Superman. And yeah, the Marvel movies very much are colourful. They've got humour to them. They don't take themselves overly seriously. I mean, there's Captain America really kind of plays it, with that sort of not really a thriller, but kind of harkens back to sort of the political dramas, I suppose, of the past. But for the most case, they do follow Superman, and I think with DC's output of more recent years, what they try. I think Zack Snyder tried to follow the mold of The Dark Knight. It didn't seem to work. I think it can't. The style of Dark Knight and its execution and its tone don't necessarily fit with Superman. So Nolan's universe exists in its own universe. There's no Superman in this world, so it just exists in its own kind of little bubble. So taking what worked in that and put it into Man of Steel and say the sequels just didn't work, I don't think, and that's why they're taking this kind of change of direction. With Wonder Woman and the Aquaman film coming out and Shazam, it's clear that they're changing even the look of the movies. There's far more color. It pops very much like the Marvel films. Yeah,
it's mad to think that Shazam is going to be happening in the same universe as Batman v Superman.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Very weird, but
Yeah.
it one of those things where they just have to reluctantly say it exists. You know, I think they probably would rather not say it exists. I mean, I still think they should have discontinued with the Green Lantern movie. It wasn't a good movie, but just say you've done it so you can use them in this universe. But they've got to start again, haven't they? With that sort of the reboot mentality. And if you remember, when you saw Justice League, were you slightly thrown back by the use of John Williams' Superman theme in that film, or were you like, oh, that's pretty cool?
Yeah, a little. It felt strange.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because, like, you sort of mentioned it earlier, like, the superheroes don't have these recognisable themes anymore. I mean, the exception, again, is Wonder Woman. The kind of electric cello riff is immediately memorable, as much as it was weird when they used it in Batman v Superman.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny because the theme they threw in for Wonder Woman in Batman vs Superman, it does get used in the standalone Wonder Woman film, but not that much. I think the composer's just gone, well, I'm just going to create my own thing, because when you have the theme at the end credits, it's like, wow, this is not the Hans Zimmer style theme. This is the composer's own music, and it sounds incredible. I suppose Captain America had a theme, didn't he, in the first Avenger, which I thought was wonderful, by Alan Silvestri. And he kind of, tips his hat to it now and again with the Avengers films. And Thor had a theme in the first movie, then they got rid of it. That's the thing. I think it's consistency, because a composer will come on and do a theme, and another composer will come on for the sequel and change all the music. I was just like, what are you doing? There's a theme there. You've just got rid of it. It's happened with X-Men. X-Men had a theme. Well, the first X-Men kind of had a theme, then John Ottman did a theme for the X-Men 2, and then there wasn't the change of composer, and then when John Ottman came back for Days of Future Past and Apocalypse, he brought his music back. I was like, oh, great, this is the X-Men theme is back. But people forget that, actually. With the Marvel movies, there's been quite a lot of videos about there's no recognisable themes, but they often forget X-Men is I suppose it's not, part of the Marvel universe, but it's still a Marvel movie. But
not at the moment, anyway.
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, but it does have themes in it, so it's a shame that these superheroes don't actually have something you can hum away to when you walk out the movie, or when they appear, and there's a big sort of theme. They may think it's a bit camp, maybe, I don't know, but I just think the studios are a bit scared to use big themes anymore.
To kind of bring it back to Superman the movie, one of the most interesting things about it, particularly with how good it is all of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes during the production of it, with the the simultaneous shooting of Superman 2, the problems with Donna and the producers. Just wondered if you could kind of speak a bit about that and how that plays into the film as you see it.
Well, as you see the film, I mean, it's lucky that it didn't fall apart. The Solkines had made two movies back to back with the Musketeers, but what they failed to do because they shot so much footage, they just basically released a sequel like the year or two later. And I believe didn't pay anyone, so just kind of released this sequel, and everyone went apeshit. So that they wanted to use that kind of formula for Superman, was to pay on $1 million to shoot Superman 1 and 2. And Mario Puzo had written this script, which was a ginormous kind of script, which was very campy, and Don didn't really like it, so he brought in who was like this kind of amazing scriptwriter, and his father, I believe, had directed Cleopatra, so he'd kind of retooled the script and kind of broke it up into all the sequels, Superman 1 and 2, and they had to change a lot. Like, the ending had to be changed because Superman would throw the nuclear missile into space and to free General Zod, and that would end. There would be no reversing time. So the reversing time idea would be thrown into Superman 2, but obviously because they felt that wouldn't be the best ending. So I suppose that would be the only standout point for me when you watch the film, how it's kind of been, the ending's been changed to shift these, have the idea that there should be a reversing time at the end. It should make it more dramatic. So the Solkines had never given Richard Donner a shooting schedule, so he never knew, how much money. Well, he knew how much money was being spent, but he didn't know how much money he was being given. So you got this. The budget was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the problem was trying to get the visual effects right. Was trying to make you believe a man could fly. And the early tests, they'd done so many tests and spent so much money with another director, which was Guy Hamilton, who directed James Bond movies. Yes. And they got nowhere with it, so that all had to be scrapped. So they had to start from the beginning. So they spent months and months trying to perfect the flying rigs and the projection system, which was kind of labelled Zoptics, which is basically kind of manipulating the lens and the background plate. So Christopher Reeve would just be static. He just needs to move his arms in the right way, and the lens would turn and the background would turn depending on what direction he was going to be flying. So it was just a mind-blowing kind of thing to see back in the 70s, where you'd just seen George Reeves on the TV show Superman just flying, and it just looked a bit ropey. So once they finished, Christopher Reeve was still on the film for another year, just doing flying stuff. So Richard Donner obviously fell out with the producers, Pierre Spengler and Alexander Salkind and Ilya Salkind, his son. He said publicly that he wouldn't work with Pierre Spengler again, and that caused a sort of rift between them publicly, and his services weren't required for Superman 2, because Donner was all prepared to come back, but I think it was just kind of who said what publicly kind of destroyed this kind of relationship. And films are never easy to make. You're always going to have problems along the way, and they're never smooth. And Superman, the movie, had a lot of problems, but Donner managed to hold everyone together and sort of keep everyone positive throughout, despite him being very upset and depressed and trying to get everything done on time. But I think it was supposed to be a summer movie that obviously got delayed till Christmas of 78, but they managed to get it all done, and it was this massive movie of 50 million. I mean, I think they probably had less money, but the more Warner Brothers saw what they were doing when I was seeing the rushes, they were like, wow, this is amazing, we'll give you more money. But then the Salkinds have to give up more of their rights. So I think the Salkinds basically had the rights to the TV broadcasting, so that's why when it was shown on TV it was extended to 3 hours. The longer you make it, the more adverts you can put in it. So a bit like YouTube videos.
Yes.
So over 10 minutes you can put another advert in there. So but yeah, so it was unfortunate that Donner didn't come back for Superman 2, and Richard Lester, who directed that film, was working on the first Superman movie as a kind of line producer, as a go-between. So Donner obviously fell out with the producers, so he'd speak to Richard Lester, who would then pass on the information to the Salkinds, and Lester would help him out. But once Donner was fired, Lester took over and never spoke to Donner again, as far as I'm aware. So Donner was kind of felt heartbroken and sort of backstabbed in a way. So, but I still like Superman 2. I think it's a pretty good film, and they'd managed to obviously had to reshuffle everything. No Brando was in Superman 2 theatrical cut because he wanted money, so they had to change it so it had to be his mum who he spoke to and how he lost his powers and stuff. But over the years, obviously, they released the director's cut of Richard Donner's version, so he had all the Marlon Brando stuff in it. But it's the story of how Superman the movie was made is being told so many times. There's obviously documentaries, there's articles about it, and so it's common knowledge, I think, to a lot of film fans what went on behind the scenes. But the outcome was amazing, though. So it's the same with things like RoboCop that had a very difficult production, but you got a great movie at the end. So it's all good.